In the book on monsters by Asma, Asma quotes Dr. Kill when he talks about psychopaths as saying that psychopaths just don't care. In the movie Child's Play, I encountered a psychopath who I've never seen anything like before, but he's in the form of a small child. Charles Lee Ray is a vicious killer. He also practices black magic and has plans to transfer his soul to the body of another person one day. Paragraph 4 from the article, Chucky from Child's Play is recognizable. This quote basically describes the essential mission of movie from the monster, Chucky. For the monster, Chucky, Chucky is the only killer that I've ever seen that wants to kill another child or kill a child. But since the fact that he is a child on the exterior doesn't justify the fact that he's a monster that kills a child, that wants to kill a child, and that's why he is probably the most vicious monster out of all of them that I've watched during this film and in my previous childhood as well as current adulthood. But Andy is he's the only child to a mother who is caught up in a lifestyle of working so that she can get the things that she wants, so she doesn't spend a lot of time with her son. He is lonely and dying for a companion. No pun intended. This is evident by the scene on his birthday in which him and his mom are the only one present at his birthday party. And to replace the lack of time she spends with her son, she buys him the doll so that he can have company, essentially, and so that she can go on trying to live the American dream as many Americans were during the 1980s. The movie Child Play shines light on the single-parent child abandonment issues of the 1980s, and it presents itself in the form of a monster who is in the form of a innocent children's toy or doll. Also in the movie, voodoo, the lack of parents and friends, and many other factors play a role into the complex movie Child Play. Also in this video, I'll be talking about the monstrosity makeup of Chucky. In the movie, Andy gets the doll and immediately has a connection with the doll because of the lack of connection that he has with others, including his mother. When the doll tells Andy who he really is, Andy still is attracted to the doll because he has no one else. Even if the doll is telling him about all of the bad things that he has done. But still, the doll is all that he has to confide in. And the doll confides in him in a sense. This is because in the 1980s, it was about the me stereotype of people living in the 80s, Americans living in the 80s. Americans, they seem to only care about money. And it came first over everything, including people's own children. This is evident by in a paragraph of the article. The 1970s and the 1980s were a period of change in American society. In this article, it talks about an American teacher who was teaching over in Britain, and one of his students who was British asked him what was the most important thing to Americans. And the teacher told him earning money. And this was in the 1980s when this happened. The idea of Andy being independent is shown in the first scene that you see of him, pretty much, where he's making breakfast for his mom. Even though it's not a good breakfast, he tried to make breakfast, and it shows that at 6 years old, he's capable of doing things on his own because he's been forced into that. So he does things on his own because his mother's not around to do it. so he can pretty much live without an adult. On page 5 of Parenting Together, a book, the author says, it is a rare household indeed in the 1980s that can adequately support 2 adults and 1 or more children. This shows how society in the 80s pretty much were all about making the money and everything else came second. Another point of interest in the movie that shows him being independent is where he had no problem riding the train without an adult, although he had Chucky with him, but he really didn't. I mean, people around him didn't really understand that he was an adult, so it was essentially like he was riding alone on that train. In an article on the website Horror Film History, the author of the article says, dolls are us, but not us. And I feel like this is true, especially to a kid who is lonely and desperate for someone he knows will be there for him till the end. Like they say in the commercial for the Good Guy doll. And Andy believes that this is Chucky. And that's why no matter what Chucky tells him at the beginning of the film, he takes it and understands that this guy is supposed to be with me for the end. He's my friend. One that he's never really had. And Child's Play Chucky presents a rarity. As explained further in the article previously stated, there is nothing we've seen before in terms of the hunt for a brutal, inhuman murderer who must be stopped before he picks off the main characters. It's just we have never seen it done with a blue-eyed, red-haired dungaree doll. Explaining the outer form of Charles, to be honest, because Chucky is just an exterior. Just like, they say in philosophy that the body is just a rental. This is really kind of true in Chucky's case, because his body, hopefully for him, is a rental. And looking into the monstrosity of Chucky or Charles Lee Ray, I found that as a human, Charles Lee Ray portrayed the images of well-known serial killers like Charles Manson and James Earl Ray and Harvey Oswald, based on the vicious murders and the blowing up of buildings due to the voodoo that he tries to cast upon Andy, and the voodoo that he casts upon the original Chucky doll that he's in. Also, I noticed that when he becomes Chucky, he then shows characteristics of infamous monsters from previous films like Michael Myers. He does this with his knife-wielding tendencies. He then shows forms of Dracula, by biting Andy's mother on the neck numerous times towards the end of the movie. Another interesting thing about Chucky is that he's not big like other monsters that we've studied during the class. He has a small complexity, which essentially works in his favor because it makes him hard to catch, and the fact that he is now a doll makes him pretty much invincible to consequences of his actions. Like police can't get him and things like that because he's just a doll. And like, where do you lock up a doll? Another interesting thing about the good guy doll with the bad guy soul is the fact that he's supposed to be a good guy doll, but he has a bad guy soul, going back to the fact that the body is simply just a rental, and from a philosophical standpoint. And another thing I thought that was interesting, another thing that played a role that was that was symbolic in the movie Child's Play was that the doll had red hair, which symbolizes kind of a troublemaker. Usually redhead kids, they get into a lot of trouble. Just like in the movie Problem Child, that kid had red hair and he dressed similar to Chucky Chucky did. And the fact that he had blue eyes, that kind of symbolizes innocence. You know, in the form of white Americans, because blue eye blonde hair, they're perfect. So when you have blue eyes, you kind of symbolize innocence in the mind of people, and that was kind of like a interesting juxtaposition because it was pretty much the opposite. They just played them both against each other. Like the doll could be, it's basically that the doll was good, but Chucky was bad, symbolizing his hair being bad and his eyes being good. That's why he was able to fool people early in the movie, because he put those blue eyes on them, and then they say no, the doll is not doing anything. It's just a doll. Another interesting aspect of the movie was voodoo, which they call black magic. And a scene in the movie where Chucky stabs the guy who essentially taught him magic through a voodoo doll was very interesting to me, because it showed the various ways that he kills, going back to his monstrosity. It showed the various ways that he can kill, just like, he's not just one dimensional like you have with Jason. I wouldn't say they're one dimensional, but they don't have as many, dimensions, or they're not as in depth as Chucky is. Like, he kills multiple ways, like in the second one where he killed the lady with the sewing machine, or when he tripped the dad down the stairs and then, unhooked him so that he falls on his neck. He shows, characteristics of, any type of monster that you can name. And that's what really makes him more of a in-depth character than other monsters that we have studied so far during this class. But back on the aspect of voodoo, because like I see a connection with this and the lack of parenting and father figures in Andy's life. And voodoo is mainly, they call it black magic, and it's mainly, practiced by African Americans, not African Americans, but people of black descent, like Haitians and Africans and stuff like that. So I felt like they were trying to connect it to the fact that in the 1980s, and still now, that black parents, black dads, they don't play an important role in their kids' lives. So therefore, it was like, it was kind of crazy to see how a black man could leave his spouse to raise a baby on her own. But it's weird that black magic, also known as voodoo, put a male presence in Andy's life, and I just thought that was kind of something they was trying to show, because they could have made Chucky come, from anything, but voodoo is what they chose. So, he came from voodoo, and I feel like that was like symbolized as black people, and the fact that he became the doll through voodoo also suggests to me that the voodoo was the reason for all of the crimes that he had committed, making it seem as though, black people were, to blame for these crimes. And I just thought that that's just my personal thinking. That's just how I interpret the movie. And like you said, it's about finding new visions through the movie. Horror films, they haven't been really like researched like that, and people haven't really put their own input in them. And this is just my input what I feel like, Chucky was about. But, it really goes back to, parenting in the 1980s, and how they were really more interested in making money, you know, and not really worrying about their children as much, while African Americans, on the other hand, they were more trying to strive themselves to become better, and I just felt like the voodoo took a shot, at Africans, people of African descent, but the overall thing I'm trying to, like my thesis says, it's about the way parents, were more, not just parents, but people in general, were more in tune with making money than being family oriented, and that's what my thesis was about, and that's what I feel the movie was trying to display, how they let toys, use toys and things like that to try to buy their kids off, and in this case it turned out horribly wrong for her, and that's pretty much it with the presentation.